Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of What's Happening. I'm Elliot Margolis. I'm here with my co-host Gail Burke, and our guest for this evening's show is John Kwiatek. And John has a very interesting group of people that he leads. It's called 40 Days for Life. And John, instead of me explaining it, you explain what it's all about, why it started, and what you do.
Sure. 40 Days for Life is a movement of secular and religious people who fast and pray for the end of abortion. 40 Days for Life is a movement that started in College Station in Texas in the year 2004 with volunteers, the first volunteers, for 24 hours a day. There were people praying outside of an abortion clinic for 40 days. That was the first one, as I said, in 2004. Since then, it has grown, and now it's held in over 800 cities and in 50 countries, including 150 cities in the United States of America. Beverly is just one of those 150 cities. Beverly has been part of 40 Days for Life only for the past 4 years. And just this year, we fasted and prayed outside of the Cumming Center from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. for 40 days during the fall campaign and then again during a spring campaign. Our campaign is held in front of the Cumming Center at the entrance on Elliott Street. We have 108 volunteers who at one time or another during the week will come and fast and pray for an end of abortion. The key is to be peaceful. As you know, there have been violent protests outside of abortion clinics. There have been people who've held up signs showing terrible pictures of aborted children. And it's been frightening to people. That is not our goal. Our goal is to fast and to pray and to support women who are going through a very, very difficult decision. Our goal is not to frighten them. Our goal is not to intimidate them. Our goal is to let them know that there are alternatives to an abortion.
Okay, now, before we get into the alternatives to abortion, my first question is, you're outside of the Cumming Center, and I've seen you there. I've driven by there a number of times. When people are walking by or driving by, what kind of reactions are you getting from them?
Well, it's most encouraging when people toot their horn and wave at us and thank us for being there. In fact, one day when I was standing there, a young man pulled up into the parking lot and he came out to me and handed me 2 sandwiches. He said, "I really want to thank you for being here." He said, "because there's just no way for you to know it, but a year ago, my wife was killed in a car accident. She was 8 months pregnant.
Oof.
I know the value of a human life. I'd like to give you these sandwiches just because I know you're standing here, you're fasting and you're praying. I just want to thank you for being here as a witness for life. I know the value of a human life." Now, that's one of my favorite moments. I've had other moments when women have come by waving a coat hanger at me, telling me that I was an evil person. I've been told that there are people online who, on a Beverly page, who say that it's just a bunch of old men who don't know anything.
Yeah, I've seen some women there, so that's not true.
Yeah, that is most of our volunteers. I would guesstimate that 70% are women. And I'll be honest with you, some of them are women who have had an abortion themselves and now deeply regret what has happened. I get a few people who come by giving me one-digit word. I don't know if they think I'm number one or what, but there are some people who do that, and it's. I pray for them. I think at the moment, not only am I praying for the unwed mothers or the women who are wed and choose not to have that child, I'm praying for the people who react so violently. Maybe they need my prayers as much as the women who are going through a difficult time.
Do you get involved in anything that would prevent Planned Parenthood from being funded? Do you get involved in the politics at all?
I have been, I'll be honest with you. I support Massachusetts Citizens for Life.
Okay.
I have, ever since I was a young man. I studied to be a priest for 5 years. And the first year I studied to be a priest, I had to write a term paper on a moral issue. And I don't know why I chose abortion, but I wrote a term paper in favor of abortion. My professor, a wonderful, kindly priest, came and gave it back to me and said, John, I'm going to give you a few things to read. It isn't just a blog. I want you to understand what you are in favor of. And after having done my homework, which I should have done in the first place, I realized that what is growing within a woman is not just a blob, but from the moment of conception until its natural death as a person. And so then I got involved. I prayed outside of abortion clinics in Boston on Boylston Street. In fact, I was there the day before a young man went in and murdered people inside the abortion clinic. That is not what we are about. We condemn violence. So your question is, have I been involved? Yes. Yeah. Planned Parenthood takes my tax dollars and yours and pays for abortion and for advising women to have an abortion. How can I be in support of that?
Well, they're also into the public schools, advising young girls to have abortions without informing parents.
One day, my daughter came home from the Beverly Middle School, and sitting around the supper table, she said, Dad, you won't have to worry about me. I'm going to have safe sex all the way through high school. I said, what? She said, yeah, somebody came in from, what was the name of the place? She said, it's the place that now has the abortion clinic. And they told her that as long as she had safe sex, she'd be okay all the way through high school. Well, of course, I didn't like that. So after supper, I asked her, are you sure that's what you heard? She said, absolutely, Dad. So I explained our position on that it was to remain celibate until you're married, until you know the person whom you love well enough to give yourself fully to him. I called up Fran Alexander, who was at that time our state representative. I told her what I've just told you and your viewers. Fran had me named to the high school health education board, and I met with them every month. And I was kind of a lone voice on that board because at one point, the board was voting to put condoms in the Beverly High School guidance office so that students could get them on the weekend and take them for their weekend enjoyment. The vote was 13-1 to put condoms in the school. I challenged them. I said, I have a strong hunch, I'm not the only one who feels this way. Let's have a meeting at the Beverly High School, invite the parents on or either side of the issue to come and to say what they have to say about it. And we had a forum. a man from the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, who happens to be a very good friend of mine, was the coordinator of this meeting. We didn't agree on abortion, for sure, but he was very fair and he listened to the parents. And by the end of the night, it was amazingly evident that parents did not want the condoms, and so they were not put in to Beverly High School.
Good for you.
A year later, they disbanded the Health Education Board and put condoms in Beverly schools. It's a tragedy that I did the best I could.
Yeah. Well,
One of the arguments, John, that women say is that they have a right to do with their body what they want to do, and they have control over their own body. Understood, except once you're pregnant, it's not your own body. You're sharing your body with somebody else. Wouldn't you say that's fair? So therefore, once they're pregnant, they don't have that kind of control anymore?
100% of the body that they carry has different DNA from the mother.
Yeah.
Having control over their body, I don't want to be rude, but I'm saying, as I said to my daughter, have control over your body until you're married and you know this person well enough to give yourself completely. I want you, I told her, and I tell this to I have 2 daughters. One has 3 children, is a school teacher living up in New Hampshire, and the other is a CPA who just found out last week she's expecting again. This is her 3rd child, and I'm thrilled. Both of them were advised, and by the grace of God, they took my advice, and they waited till they were married to begin a family. As you and I know, when a mother is given the privilege of carrying a child, that privilege is given to her by God, who is the creator of us all. And it's a privilege, not a burden. I'm sitting in my living room right now. This used to be my living room. Now it's my dining room. And one day, someone knocked at my front door. Said, "John, can I come in?" And I recognized her from the neighborhood. She said, "I have something I want to tell you, and I have not told it to many people." She said, I went to Beverly High School, and as a sophomore, I was coming home from a dance, and I was raped. Once I knew I was pregnant, I was convinced that I would have an abortion. Of course, my parents talked me out of it, and they said, "No, that isn't what we do. That is our belief. We'll give the child up for adoption." She said 17 years have gone by since that. And a month ago, I got a phone call from a social worker who handled the adoption. And she told me that that young boy, who's now 17, has lost his father 10 years ago and recently lost his adoptive mother, and wants to know if he can meet his birth mother. And I said, yes. And here we are walking around the neighborhood, and as we walked by the front of your house, he said, "Hey, my Uncle John lives in that house." She said, "John Kwiatek?" He said, "Yeah, that's my Uncle John. I used to go over there with my cousins, and we would hang out for the weekend." My godson, Georgie, was adopted by my sister-in-law because his mother chose to give him life.
Very interesting story.
Yeah. You know,
True story.
I'm sure you remember a few years ago when Sarah Palin was running for vice president. And she had chosen to keep her baby, even though she knew it had Down syndrome. And part of the American public thought it was a terrible idea. And they chastised her and criticized her for doing it. In the other part of the country, wished her well and were in full agreement of her carrying that baby. And I've always thought about all the criticism that she received for many things. I thought that kind of made her a hero, a heroine of sorts, because she chose to do it, knowing full well that the child would have Down syndrome and all the problems that that would entail. But I thought that was pretty courageous of her.
It is courageous. And you know, there are courageous parents all around us who are raising handicapped children and loving them. You know, some of our greatest supporters in the right to life are people who have terminal conditions.
Mhm.
They know that we represent life, not only for the unborn, but life from conception till natural death. I worked for 12 and a half years as a hospital chaplain, visited the sick. And I cannot tell you how many times I met courageous men and women who were battling illness and who wanted very much to live until their final moment. And the greatest tragedy of all were the young people who were saying, oh no, my mother doesn't have quality of life anymore, let her go. And I'd say to myself, quality? Life itself is a quality. Life is a gift from God to each one of us. I often pray for those who have handicapped, they call it handicapable children. They don't look at what they're lost, they look what they still have. Only 1% of abortions are situations that you described. In Canada, there are no babies born with Down syndrome, none, in the last 10 years, because mothers will have the test, and if there's going to be a missing chromosome, those mothers choose to destroy their unborn. That's what we pray about. I understand the struggle that parents go through. My children have had illnesses of their own, but the last thing we ever wanted for them was to not bear their sorrow with them and to get them through their most painful situations. That's what we do with the handicapped, the handicapable.
I think it's easier today than it was, say, 30, 40, 50 years ago to raise a handicapped child, because there are many, many services available now that were not available then. And I think in a lot of cases, people couldn't handle it. They really couldn't handle it, and it drove people and families apart. So I think we're progressing in that. Whether it'll ever come to fruition that abortion is illegal everywhere, I don't know. I don't know, because there are only 7 countries in the world that permit elective abortions, and the United States is one of them.
I like the point you raised about today we try to do more to support the mothers. My wife and I try to be as generous as we can with these organizations that support the mothers. They will give them a prenatal test to find out if they are pregnant for free. They'll do an ultrasound for free. They'll give them diapers and clothing and cribs and equipment for their child. When we got our check in the mail recently from the government, we didn't need it. Like a lot of people who are watching this, we didn't need it. So we gave it to one of these organizations, Options for the Poor. And they do wonderful, wonderful work. No woman today who wants to have that baby will go without help. And no woman today who wants to give up that baby for adoption will not be able to give up that baby for adoption. There are 5 couples for every 1 baby born waiting for that child.
Well, unfortunately, when it comes to adoption, it's extremely expensive for adoption nowadays, mostly because lawyers charge ridiculous amounts of money, but it can cost $25,000 for an abortion, for adoption. And to me, that's unacceptable.
I have a niece who was unable to bear a child, and my brother gave her $25,000 to go to Kazakhstan and to adopt Ramina. Beautiful little girl. Now, it isn't just simple. The reason it's so expensive is you have to pay for the flight over. You spend some time with the child, a week, maybe 2 weeks. Then you have to leave and come back again and jump through a lot of hoops, but they did. Ramina is now 11 or 12 years of age, beautiful little girl, and my niece worships the water she walks on.
Well, of course, if we had more adoptions in this country from parents who would keep the baby, the price could go down. But let me ask you about this. To me, this is an interesting dichotomy. You've got people who are in favor of abortion, but opposed to capital punishment because they don't want to kill somebody. I don't get it.
Well, there's a difference between the two. One, abortion is taking of an innocent human life. Innocent. We all know what innocent means. It means not guilty of any crime, of anything wrong. Innocent. Those who are given capital punishment are, for the most part, always considered, I shouldn't say for the most part, are always considered guilty of a crime. Now, the question is raised, what do you do about those who are falsely accused of their crime, falsely convicted? And that does happen. We have to admit that. But I believe that if we use the technology we have today of DNA testing, and there is absolutely no question of the guilt of the person, the Bible is clear. Those who take a life must forfeit their own. The difference is between innocent and guilt.
Okay, well, that's interesting perspective on that. John, people, after watching this, may be interested in joining your 40 Days for Life. Why don't you give us your information so that they could contact you?
Well, I'm thankful that you, first of all, I'm thankful that you invited me to share with your viewers about 40 Days for Life. It's easy to remember the name. We've said it over and over. 40, the number, capital DAYS, small letter FOR, and capital LIFE.com. 40daysforlife.com. If you go on that site, they will lead you to the Beverly site. We are called 40 Days. I use the number 4 in our description. 40 Days, the number 4, life/Bev. And that's for 40 Days for Life Beverly. But the quickest way is to go through the site. One of the things that it's good to go through the site is because when you sign up, you must swear that you will be nonviolent, peaceful, of prayer, willing to fast. Now, fasting isn't necessarily from food. I find that if I fast from gossip, I do pretty well. If I fast from saying something bad about another person, or if I fast from the heat in the car when I'm driving around, or I fast from, and again, food and alcohol, we can fast from those. But there are plenty of things to loosen the grip of selfishness on our lives so that when we do pray, our hearts are right with God. And again, to remind you, 40daysforlife.com online, and they will direct you to 40 days, the number 4, life/Beverly. And I would be honored. Right now we have, I'm looking for the number, I found it somewhere, 108 volunteers here in Beverly. And we can certainly use more. Again, we'll be meeting again. Our next is September 22nd till October 31st. Will be the next 40-day campaign in 2021. Thank you for the privilege that I've had of being with you today.
Well, John, I appreciate you coming on. This was a fascinating discussion and an important discussion. And I hope people do get in touch with you because, it's just important for life. So I agree with you, and I'm glad that we had this opportunity. So thank you for coming on the show.
Thank
God
you.
bless you both. Thank you.